they can just knock on the door. No, some of them didn't even knock on it. They just came in, and you had to make them at home. And we only had 2 beds. Mm-hmm. Mom and I slept on one, and my grandma on the other. And if the soldiers were civilized, my mother would bring in straw from the barn and throw it on the ground and put a sheet over it, and they slept on it. If they weren't, they took your bed, and we had to sleep on the straw. But anyhow, there's these 3 German soldiers. They're there. And, you have to live around them. So I ate, and I got ready for bed, and I'm kneeling on the top of my bed praying. And the one soldier is talking in German to me, and he's going, come.
Did you understand German?
No.
Okay.
So I knew, and he was pointing. He said, my mother said, go, and he wants something. I went, and he opened up his knapsack, his bag, and he pulled out, I don't know what. It was wrapped in foil. And he broke it up, gave me a piece, and I said, what is it? And he said, eat it. He had a piece. He gave me a piece. And he kept saying, it sounded like chocolate, like chocolate. That's how in Slovak. And my mother, who knew, better than me, she goes, take it. She told me in Slovak, it's chocolate. She says, I think it's chocolate. You never had chocolate in the war. So I took a little piece, and it was good. So, he gave me the whole piece. That was my first taste of chocolate. Then I didn't have chocolate for a long time after that. Because the Russians never gave us anything. And then, I don't know what year it was. It must have been the last year, 1945, the winter of 44 or 45. I made my communion in 44, and I was made to give flowers to this German. And
do you remember who it was?
It wasn't Hitler. It was a high official going to Poland. And at the beginning of the village where the cross is, it's the year I made my communion. I had a white dress and my mother's wedding veil that they fixed. They said I had to welcome with a young boy, a classmate of mine.
Jano? Was it Jano? No.
No, it was a blonde boy. They wanted just blondes with blue eyes.
Oh, like the Aryan. Yeah.
So, I had a bouquet and all I had to say was, Witajcie do Slovenskej Vsi. Welcome to Slovenska Ves, and he said the same thing. I was scared to death, but that's what I had to do.
God, I bet.
Rags or curtains on.
So the last Christmas Eve, you couldn't have any lights?
No.
What year was it?
45.
Okay.
That's when you could hear the Russians there and the Germans still here and the partisans there. But we went to midnight mass, and it was just candles. We had no electricity. We had no electricity in the village. And the priest was having a sermon, and then the organ. We had an organ, but it was not electric. You had to pump it somehow.
A pedal.
A pedal. And they started to play Tichá noc, which is Silent Night. And there were some Germans in a courtyard of the church. And they stacked their guns, and they came into the vestibule. It was so confusing near the end. It was so confusing. These partisans were up in the mountains near the Tatras, in the Tatras, and Russians were in Kizmarok. You could hear them, There were still some Germans that were running here and there, and some of the Germans, I don't know, they said, I'm not going. I don't know whether they killed themselves or they were killed. They've had enough, So the Russians came. And the ladies, some of the women, the elder women in the village, the last 2 nights before all this happened, there were no men. They hid in a forest. One young man was in a seminary. He was a student. His mother dressed him as a girl so they wouldn't take him.
Oh, my God.
And the women would get up on a roof and wave white sheets to let the partisans know that it's going to be over. The Russians are within 5 kilometers away. Oh, my God. The church was open 24 hours. People who were afraid, they went to church and slept. And they were, Russians are Slavic, different, but, and I'm sure, they weren't going to be, they should have left them. What the hell, because the Russians would hear the Russians bombarding Keshmaruk. And we had to go hide too then. They told us we had to go stay in a basement. We had no basement in our house. Our house was we had like a hole for potatoes. Which we went next door and we slept there for a couple nights until the Russians came and liberated. It was a confusing time. Some of the Germans didn't want to leave. They said, we're tired, we don't want to. It was just enough for everybody. And people were so happy to have the Germans go. I mean, they were partisans. You know what a partisan was?
What?
They were Slovaks who had enough of the Germans and the Nazi rule. So they formed their own they were like a secretive army to fight against the Russians.
Oh, like a militia.
Yeah, against the Nazis, not the Russians. Yeah, against the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived in the mountains, like in the Tatra Mountains or any mountain, or they were not out in the open. And the only way they were able to survive is with the citizens, the Slovak citizens, helping them, feeding them. Well, our house, where John Kolja lived, there's houses there. We were like the last house at the end there. The Tatra Mountains weren't far. The back window, my grandmother would open up, and we had so little, but whatever we had, she would give them. They'd come. Sometimes they'd come on cross-country skis from the... I don't know how I survived.
You're a strong lady.
Well, I'm not I was a kid. My mother was. My mother was.
You had a tough life.
Well, it wasn't. I didn't know it was tough.
Well, you didn't know any different.
I didn't know any different. But now that I think about it, how confusing, how, one winter, the last winter in my school year, I had no shoes. I couldn't go to school. I had no shoes. You had to have special tickets or something, coupons to get shoes. We didn't have them. So I didn't go to school the whole winter. And the priest and the teacher would come to the house and bring me books and stuff. And, then my father finally wrote my mother, okay, I'm here, you're going to come. And he said, what do you need? So my mother says, Albina needs shoes. Okay.
Well, she hasn't heard from him in 10 years.
I know. So, Albina could use some shoes. And I guess he said, okay, so the package came in. They told I ran to the post office, got the package. We rip it open, and there was stuff in there like there was more chocolate, chewing gum, which I didn't know. We threw it away. We didn't know what chewing gum was. And shoes. 2 pairs of shoes. One patent leather, beautiful, and the other one was like little, no, they didn't fit me.
I was about to ask, how do you know what size you were?
They didn't fit me. I had to give them away to my cousin, Uncle John's daughter, Helen. And I still had no shoes. Then finally the young priest in the village had pity on me. He somehow got a thing, whatever, and I got some kind of shoes with wooden soles, but they were shoes, and I was able to